Can BYU make a run in March Madness? In today's video, we're going to be taking a deep look at BYU's bracket draw to determine can they make the Sweet 16 or maybe go even further. We'll also look at the national title contenders and decide who can realistically win it all. And finally, I'm going to reveal my full bracket from round of 64 all the way up through the national championship game. Now, my instant reaction to seeing BYU's matchup versus number 11 seed VCU is why exactly is VCU in 11? VCU at KenPom is 30, BPI is 33, and net is 31. Compare that to BYU, who's around 24, 25 in these metrics. And that gap is not very big compared to what you'd expect for a typical 6-11 matchup. And illustrating that, the other 11 seeds at KenPom come in at 33, 43, 44, 46, and 58. So VCU far from the best draw in terms of 11 seeds BYU could have gotten. I'm looking at the resumes. VCU 2-1 versus Quad 1, 6-4 versus Quad 2, compared to BYU 8-7 versus Quad 1, 6-2 versus Quad 2. So both teams have showed well against stronger competition. Obviously, BYU's had more opportunities, and especially more opportunities against elite teams than VCU. Their road records: VCU 7-3, BYU 6-5. Both teams have showed an ability to win on the road, and that matters a lot in March when you aren't playing in your home gym and don't have your home fans necessarily behind you for every matchup. One key difference between the teams: BYU is much higher on the strength of record metric from ESPN, obviously a function of their much stronger schedule in the Big 12. And the KenPom rating, BYU is about 2 points better. So overall, BYU is better, but maybe not by as much as you'd expect for a typical 6 versus 11 matchup. So some cause for concern with this draw, but BYU is better overall. Now, some things to fear about VCU's team is their defense and their size, especially coming off BYU's loss to Houston. You might call VCU Houston light. They play a little bit of a similar style. They pride themselves on their defense, and their size inside could give BYU some difficulty. However, there's some things to like about this matchup. First and foremost, playing in Denver is a nice draw. The altitude, proximity to Provo, willingness of BYU fans to make that short flight or short drive over. This is a great location for BYU to draw. Also, VCU has some great metrics, especially on defense, but they came against far weaker competition. They had 104th ranked strength of schedule compared to BYU's 53. So BYU is much more battle tested. Of course, the matchup to watch is VCU's 23rd ranked defense versus BYU's 11th ranked offense. If BYU can take care of business on the offensive end, they should be just fine. And with that, my key to winning is to limit turnovers and to rebound. When you don't do those things, you risk losing even to inferior competition in March. So take care of the basketball, grab some rebounds, and make sure that those 3-point shots fall, and we'll be just fine. Point spread sitting at around BYU minus 2.5 with an implied final score of BYU 73, VCU 70.5. I'm going to take BYU to cover and predict a few more points than that. I'll go BYU 81, VCU 75 for my first round matchup. Moving on to round two. If BYU does prevail over VCU, they'll draw either 3 seed Wisconsin or 14 seed Montana, but really just 3 seed Wisconsin. I don't think there's a shot Montana wins in round one. Now, as far as 3 seeds go, Wisconsin isn't a terrible draw. For example, Texas Tech and Iowa State are better per KenPom. Obviously, BYU's beaten Iowa State twice, but I still don't want to see them again if I don't have to. Now, some things to fear about this matchup. Wisconsin's offense, you might describe them as like if BYU was good at free throws. And, they shoot the three well, just like BYU does, and they also shoot free throws well, which can make a difference in a close game in March. They also have a better defense than BYU by a substantial margin. They're a very well-rounded team, and of course, they're pretty hot. Although they did lose in the Big Ten finals, they made a nice run to get there. Some things to like: they're still playing in Denver. Again, as we've discussed before, that's an advantage for BYU. And also, the gap between BYU and Wisconsin, according to the metrics we've been looking at, KenPom, BPI, etc., it isn't all that different than the gap between BYU and VCU. So, as concerned as BYU fans are about VCU, that's about how concerned Wisconsin fans should be about this matchup with BYU. Now, I've kind of been going back and forth on this matchup. I think this is strong possibility for BYU to pull the upset, but ultimately I think Wisconsin will prevail. I'm going Wisconsin 73, BYU 68, though of course I'd love to be wrong about this. Now, if I am wrong and BYU does make it to the Sweet 16, they'd likely match up against number 2 Alabama. Um, and, as far as two seeds go, again, it could really be worse. And, I'm really only going to focus on the Bama matchup here. I don't think St. Mary's or Vandy are going to beat them in round two. Some things to fear, and this is only a little bit of an exaggeration. Alabama may very well put 110 points on BYU. They're number 4 in KenPom offensive rating, and as we know, BYU does not exactly hang their hat on their defense. Some things to like, though, is that Bama's the only 2 seed that is not top 5 in KenPom defensive rating, and you can never count BYU out in a shootout, especially a 3-point shootout. So, in terms of the play style compared to the other number 2 seeds and the strengths and weaknesses of Bama, I think that this is a matchup that BYU could at least have a chance in, and especially BYU put 96 on a top 10 Iowa State defense. That shows that they have the firepower to keep pace with one of the best offensive teams in the country. That being said, I don't see Bama having any trouble here. I think they're going to score as many points as they want to. I'm going Bama 98, BYU 86 in a high scoring matchup. And if I am wrong and BYU makes it through to the Elite Eight, they'd likely face off against number 1 Duke or maybe for Arizona if they're able to pull the upset. And Duke is really, really good. They've been the most popular champion picked so far at ESPN. And BYU did split with Arizona. They'd probably be an underdog in the rubber match, but you have to like their chances against Arizona with their familiarity with them a lot more than their chances against Duke. What it comes down to is if we draw Duke, we're just happy to be here. BYU is not beating Duke. Um, you know, Probably time to take the blue goggles off if you think they are. Think at that point we enjoy the great run, we build off it next year. But if we do draw Arizona or other, if Duke does get upset, maybe it's time to book a refundable flight to San Antonio. Pending the result of that matchup, we could be in for a very exciting Final Four appearance. However, even if we do make it to the Final Four, our reward is probably a rematch with Houston, and I think we all know how that's going to go. So here's a summary of BYU's path. VCU's tougher in 11, but BYU's better. Take care of the basketball, rebound, and shoot the three well, and they'll be just fine. Wisconsin and Bama look like beatable higher seeds. Of course, BYU is going to need to shoot the lights out in both of those games. Elite Eight, if it's Duke, it's going to be a very, very difficult matchup for BYU. Duke is just so good and so well rounded. But if it's Arizona or anyone else, and BYU does make it to that point, I think you can make a legitimate case that they can make the Final Four. But if they do make it there, well, Houston, we have a problem. Switching gears a little bit, we want to answer the question of who can win it all. And, this is meant to help you guys win your pool for March Madness and make sure you can beat your friends. And of course, the scoring is typically heavily weighted towards the person who picks the correct national champion is going to win. So with that, we want to identify how many teams can realistically win the title. Now, I have 4, maybe 6 teams that can do it. This is looking at their KenPom net ratings, and we can notice that Duke is quite a bit better than the other 1 seeds. But then there is a big drop off between Auburn at 4 and Tennessee at 5. So we could almost just cut it right there and say only the 1 seeds are legitimate national title contenders. But if we want to expand it a little more, I'd look at Tennessee and Bama. That drop off between Bama and Texas Tech is pretty significant. But I think both of these teams are battle tested in the SEC. And if you have um, the desire to pick a non-1 seed to win the title, these are the 2 I would go to. Past Bama, though, I don't see Texas Tech, Michigan State, any of the other 2 or 3 seeds winning the national title. That doesn't mean they can't make the Final Four. It just means that I don't think they can win the title. Now we also want to look at who is the public overrating and underrating, and these are coming from brackets filled out so far at ESPN. So overrated, it looks like St. John's and Michigan State are maybe being a little bit overrated by the public. They were not within my list of true national title contenders on the previous slide, but they're more popular than Bama and Michigan so far. Now, I'd also question looking at these results, is Duke really that much better than the other 1 seeds? They have a great record and they are a very well rounded team. They have some star power, but they haven't played the kind of competition that the top SEC teams have throughout the year. So, if anything, I feel like maybe the public is overrating Duke just a little bit. Not as a Final Four contender. I think they have a very strong chance to make it there, but as a national title contender, they're a reasonable choice, but they're not the clear-cut number one choice. And on a related note, are Auburn and Houston being disrespected a little bit? 11 and 8% of brackets have them in the national champion, have them winning the title, but it seems like it should be a little bit higher, especially for Auburn, who is the number one overall seed and therefore has the easiest bracket. Regardless of whether you think Duke and Florida are better than Auburn, you can't deny that Auburn has the easiest path there. And the most underrated, Tennessee and Bama, I think, are not being taken as seriously as people should be. I think that these teams were close to winning the SEC tournament, and that shows that they have the ability to hang with anybody in March and a chance to, pull an upset over some of these one seed teams. Now, overall, I would say that your best chance to win is to pick a one seed not named Duke. There's going to be several other people in your group that are picking Duke to win. So your best chance to win is probably not picking Duke and hoping that your champion prevails and hoping you can do well in the other matchups to get a point lead. And here's another bonus slide. These are some trendy upset picks you should consider. And the percentages here come from the people's bracket at ESPN, the percentage of people picking these upsets. So UC San Diego over Michigan, 22%. When I saw that, I was like, wow, what a terrible reward for Michigan for winning the Big Ten title. They get one of the best mid majors in the country. Yale over Texas A&M. You could also consider Yale very tough defense could pose some problems for Texas A&M. Other ones, New Mexico over Marquette, VCU over BYU. Sadly, has been picked about 31% of the time. Vandy over St. Mary's, 45%. Colorado State over Memphis is an interesting 12-5 matchup. Drake over Missouri, 40% in that 11-6 matchup. Arkansas over Kansas, some people are considering. Georgia over Gonzaga, and also Utah State over UCLA. So these are just some teams to keep in mind if you do have the desire to add a couple more upsets to your bracket. These are maybe some places you should look. And finally, we're going to be looking over my entire bracket, starting with the South region. I have Auburn winning this. I don't really see them having much trouble. As far as the 8-9 matchup, this is a toss up. Could really go either way, but it doesn't really matter. Neither of these teams are beating Auburn, so don't sweat that one too much. Um, Again, UC San Diego and Yale are going to be popular upset picks, but I don't see either of them getting the job done against Michigan or Texas A&M. And then Ole Miss should handle whichever of the first four teams they get, and Iowa State should have no trouble against Lipscomb. My one upset in the first round I'm going is New Mexico over Marquette. New Mexico has played at a very high level throughout the Mountain West season. Of course, they faltered in the tournament, but I think they have a chance to take care of Marquette. And then Michigan State's going to move on. And in round two, I see Auburn, Michigan moving on. And Iowa State, shorthanded though they might be, I see them taking care of Ole Miss. And Michigan State should handle New Mexico. And finally, Auburn versus Michigan State is going to be that matchup in the Elite Eight. I don't see Iowa State making too deep of a run just because they are short-handed. But again, none of the teams in this region should really challenge Auburn, although Michigan may give them some trouble in the Sweet 16. Now down to the West region, I have Florida winning this. Again, I don't see them running into too many difficulties. I'm going UConn over Oklahoma, but my big upset is I'm going Colorado State over Memphis. And then I'm also going Drake over Missouri in this bracket. So, this West region has a couple of upsets that I pulled the trigger on. Texas Tech, Kansas, St. John's moving on. Then I have Florida and yes, Colorado State moving on to the Sweet 16. I think if you want to pick a double-digit seed to go to the Sweet 16, Colorado State might be a good place to look. They're coming off the Mountain West tournament win. They are red hot right now. And then I'm going Texas Tech over Drake, St. John's over Kansas. No big surprise there. And then Florida versus St. John's. Fascinating matchup, but I think Florida has enough firepower to get the job done. Now in the Midwest, I've got Houston sailing through without too much trouble. Gonzaga and Georgia aren't going to challenge them. That one's a toss up, but again, I don't think it matters. I think Clemson and Purdue will escape the upsets. I do have Illinois losing to either Texas or Xavier. I think It's always seems like there's a team that comes through the first four and wins another game after that, and I think this is a spot to look at. Kentucky gets Mark Pope's first tournament win. I'm also going Utah State over UCLA. Utah State did not have a great run down the stretch, but um, UCLA might give them an opportunity to turn that around. And then, yeah, Tennessee, Kentucky, Houston, Clemson in the Sweet 16. And then I have Houston, Tennessee. And I think Houston, although they let me down last year when I picked them to win the national title, I see them making it to the Final Four through this bracket. And finally, in the East region, I've got Duke sailing through their matchup, beating Baylor. And then that matchup with Arizona is an interesting one. Arizona, probably the first team that's going to legitimately challenge Duke. Have Oregon and Arizona winning their matchups. I have BYU, of course, beating VCU, but falling to Wisconsin. I have Vandy over St. Mary's, although that one could really go either way. And then Bama over Wisconsin. And in this Bama Duke matchup in the Elite Eight, this is where I'm going to break and go against the public and pick Bama to pull the upset over Duke. Again, Duke has been a very, very popular pick to win the title, but I think that Bama is one of the teams that could really stop the one seed from making the Final Four. So that's going to be my lone non one seed making the Final Four is Alabama. And now going into the Final Four, Auburn, Florida. This is a tough one to project. Florida won the SEC title, but Auburn has been so solid throughout the year, and hopefully the first few rounds of the tournament give them enough time to get hot again. And then Bama, Houston. Again, I'm gonna forgive Houston for letting me down last year, and I'm gonna pick their defense to handle Alabama's offense and bring them down to earth. But then I'm gonna go Auburn over Houston in the finals. Let me know what you think about my bracket. Am I missing anything? Are there any obvious upsets that I should go for? Or is this a little bit too boring? Do I need to introduce a couple lower seeds making runs into the Sweet 16 or farther? Let me know, and until the next time, go Cougs.